You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
Welcome to Scuderia F1, the podcast that's always up to speed with the latest Formula One news. Follow us on Twitter at Scuderia F1 Pod and subscribe to the show on iTunes and Stitcher. Now, here are your hosts, Mark Dailey and Kevin Laramée.
Hello and welcome to Scuderia F1, the podcast that is always up to speed with the latest Formula One news. I'm your host, Mark Dailey, and joining me as always is Kevin Laramée. And Kevin, for the first time in months, we have things to talk about.
It's crazy, right? The season starts not even a month from now, where it's March 1st when we're recording this, late maybe, but 25 days from now, we'll be watching racing. And there's testing now in Barcelona, and it's fun to see the new cars. We actually see them in action now. We see them turning. We hear the opinions of drivers, and it's really making this 2017 season, like, we know it's a transition season, but now we actually see it, and it's finally here. Those brand new cars, a new evolution, development, and Lewis Hamilton comes out of the pit with a weird wing that comes up, and there's two little flaps. And a lot of things different, but I like the first look at the new car. It's different with just the naked eye to make a big difference, but it does look a bit more aggressive. We'll talk about later, Mark, to see if it actually is the answer to F1's problem, but according to Lewis Hamilton. But I am quite pleased by the first look at the car.
Yeah, definitely. And I say it a little bit tongue-in-cheek that there's finally news to talk about, because this has been one hell of an eventful off-season when you think that just days after winning the World Championship, Nico Rosberg announced his retirement from the sport. That was followed up by the Liberty Media purchase being finalized and going through, and Bernie Ecclestone getting the sack, and Manor Racing folding and not making it to the grid, and Formula One being dragged into possible investigations by the anti-competition branch of the European Union. So, but when I say there's finally something to talk about, I mean more on the track, on the asphalt, like the nuts and bolts stuff as Formula One fans that we all really love. And it's great to see. I mean, it's a little bit hard to tell, obviously, how all the teams compare to one another. Obviously, we've seen Ferrari up there the last couple of days. Mercedes has been quickest in testing, but we won't really know for sure how they really compare to one another once they get to Melbourne in a couple of weeks and they're all in race trim and all those things. But I mean, it is interesting, at least off of the bat, to see that Ferrari is right up there with Mercedes. And what I thought was especially interesting today was Valtteri Bottas was fastest in Mercedes. He broke the 1 minute 20 barrier. I think it was like a 1 minute 19 point something.
7:05.
7:05. And if you compare that to the lap record in Spain, which is a 1:21.67, which was set by Kimi Räikkönen back in 2008. Well, wow, that's interesting. So we'll see how that compares when they get to Barcelona in, about 2.5, 3 months in the middle of May there for the race.
But, apparently, it's like a second. They compared testing times, too, for what that could be worth. And it's about a second faster so far. So with the new development, with the better DRS system, the bigger traction on the tires, bigger, they can actually take corners faster. So there's that aspect to it that explains the better timing. But it's interesting you mentioned Bottas and his great run. The two time that for me are impressive is Renault, Julian Palmer and Nico Hülkenberg in 4th and 5th. Yes, it's only testing times and it's not really worth a lot in the grand scheme of things when you're trying to handicap the teams, but not a lot of bottom teams up there. One here, one there, you're sober too. But for Renault, both of them are there. So it's indicative of something. It's not just a fluke of one guy out of the two had no fuel left in his tank, so it was really light and had a super fast tires at the perfect track condition. No, both of them are there, and maybe it tells us a little something. I do believe, and it's a theory that we had, and we talked about last year, Mark, Renault as a constructor, manufacturer, whenever there's a lot of evolution and change in F1, whenever they change the rules, they change the engine, they go to the V-shaped turbo back then, or the V-shaped engine, sorry, or the turbo, or all those evolution over the years, Renault, when they started those evolution there, they were always successful in that first and second year, in that first phase of the new cars. We are in that phase right now. And seeing those two Renault there might be telling us that the engine got a little better and they got something right in development. So I'm not surprised to see them there, and just maybe confirms that theory that we all have.
Well, definitely. I think that they said last year when they bought the Lotus team, and they were going to basically, well, they obviously had a Lotus branded Renault or some sort of hybrid Renault Lotus car for last season, but they have this short to midterm plan, which is going to be about 5 years long, to get them back up to the top of the sport. And getting Nico Hülkenberg was one of those things. And obviously the developing the car and the engine and everything like that, that's a longer process, and that's something that they're going to have to develop over time. But it will be interesting to see how this car, like a true Renault, is going to compare this year compared to the car last year, because, like I say, that was basically a Lotus from that had been designed for all intensive purposes. So
it was a mishmash. It was a like a new team, basically, that got the old car. They're working with different plans on the old car. They're trying to make everything fit together. So that would explain their 2016 season in a nutshell. But we'll see what Renault has in store. We're talking about the new cars, Mark, so I'll go here right now. Lewis Hamilton mentioned, don't hold your breath, in his own words, basically, for spectacular racing on the track. Because it's all well and good, but it's still not addressed. It still doesn't address what Hamilton feels is the problem with the cars in F1. He says the grip that we have is all well and good, but it's not a mechanical grip. It's an aerodynamic, downforce grip, basically, which it means that when the downforce is not there, you have no grip. And it's worse. So even if you're a pack, you're in the peloton, basically, you're in the midst of other cars, you're not going to get that grip because you don't have the airflow coming in correctly in the front to give you that downforce that gives you that grip. He says the cars are missing mechanical grip, what used to be what F1 was known for, the old type of grip on cars before aerodynamic. And that's what he believes is the key to having great racing in F1. Yes, it's a step in the right direction because of the tires, but it's more than that is needed. And it's interesting that he's talking about that, because we talked about this last year, how it's all well and good and Mercedes are designed to be great in front of the pack, but whenever Rosberg or Hamilton from time to time were stuck in the back, it took them a lot of hard work to get back in front because their car was not designed to be in traffic. So there's a lot of that questioning now going on for the future, how to bring back that mechanical grip aspect and take a little bit off of the downforce grip to maybe make it a little more level playing field and easier for the driver to have spectacular racing.
It's very interesting when you hear those comments by Lewis and then compare that to some of the other comments that you hear from other drivers like Max Verstappen, who's basically said that he doesn't really feel that much of a difference driving behind other cars compared to last year. And then you get the comments of Sebastian Vettel, who says that the new regulations are like an aspirin, that it's basically in one fell swoop has cured Formula One and all the ailments that it's had with the cars over the last several 3-4 years, whatever it is, since they switched to the previous format. Those are all gone now. This is just one thing that just changed it all magically. He said that the cornering speeds are better and there's obviously more grip, and he really likes it. And then you get the comments of Nico Rosberg, who's there, obviously not driving, but they're just observing, and he reckons that the cars are going to be so much more work for the drivers to handle. And he basically said that he expects to see guys actually losing races or losing position on the track later in the races because they will be fatigued. They'll be tired after basically manhandling these cars around the track at those speeds and those G-forces through the corners. So there's a lot of different opinions out there. And
you know what? I just had enough flash, Mark. Remember F1 superstars back then? They were not 18, 19-year-olds.
That's right.
Grown men, physically strong men, that were able to clutch the damn car and endure the G-force, but they're just shifting gears. It was mechanical. It was tough. It was hard. I'm not talking about power steering here. So those are the type of F1 drivers that existed. It might take a while, and it might take a few trips to the gym for Verstappen, but maybe those are the type of skill set that will be necessary again in the future to be able to shift the damn car correctly and not just press a damn button.
That's so true. And I'm sadly old enough to remember not just remember, but remember quite well the days before semi-automatic shifting, when they actually had a gear shift lever in the cockpit. And sometimes you would see a guy come out of the corner and he'd get really slow because he just couldn't engage the gear. And, he'd be stuck in the gate there somewhere trying to get between second and third or third and fourth, whatever the case may be. And a couple of guys just race around him, and you see a guy lose a couple of positions. And of course technology obviously is part of Formula One, and that's part of the appeal. But also, I guess from a purist point of view, if you can find that balance between the sort of the more old-fashioned traditional kind of manual,
electronic, like mechanical versus electronic, I would say.
Well, I'd say the sort of the manual control of the car that the driver has to do to actually drive it, and strike that balance with the cool technology that you get and that you've seen over the years in Formula One. It doesn't matter what it might be, but I think that's what you want to do. You don't want to put it all in the hands of the drivers. You don't want to put it all in the hands of technology. If you could find that balance, I think that would be the ideal situation for Formula One. And perhaps that's what they're aiming for right now, and how successful they'll be. Well, we won't know until at least the first couple of races, until we really see the new cars in action, at any rate.
Maybe that's the difference between a driver and a pilot. A driver can just drive a car. A pilot needs to be able to pilot the car, which means change the gears, put the car in the right and necessary mode, change the clutch, all those aspects that we're not even aware of. And it's funny, like you mentioned, I remember in IndyCar in the middle of the 90s, when it was Patrick Carpentier's time and all that, where I was following open wheel racing very closely at that level, at that age. It was yes, semi-automatic in a way, but it still needed like a very big shift, and it was counterintuitive because you were going the exact opposite that you would think. So you were going up to go down and down to go up because of G-force, to make sure you don't do the wrong thing at the wrong time. So it was still difficult, and we're talking about not even that long ago. So up until beginning of 2000, F1 came before that, and we famous in late 90s, early 2000, the Ferrari shift where the driving wheel. So
yep.
You know what I mean? So the steering wheel, the famous shift stick that arrived in the 90s, and then it became a popularity. And the first Ferrari, the Dormo car that had those shift paddle, became like a big cultural success because of it. And that is because of F1. But before that, even up until 93, 94, those early Schumacher years, it was still piloting that car. And nowadays, I hope it gets back to, like you mentioned, that balance. But it's hard to get that balance back too when the technology side maybe was pushed a little too far on one side.
And that's true. And just talking about piloting compared to driving a car, poor old Lance Stroll, 18-year-old Lance Stroll from Montreal, our countryman, he is having a bit of a tough time at testing. He's been in the car, the Williams, the FW40, for 3 days now, and he's had 2 crashes. And it sounds like as a result of the latest crash, he almost put in 100 laps on Wednesday. He was on his 99th lap. He had a spin, damaged the car, and due to a lack of parts on hand, Williams may actually lose that final day of testing for Lance. And Lewis Hamilton has been supportive, and former world champion Damon Hill had said the same thing. Give the guy some time. And Lewis said, well, Lance is coming in what is probably one of the toughest years in Formula One in recent history. So as easy as it is to sit here, kind of cluck your tongue and shake your head and say, well, that's what you get for putting an 18-year-old driver into a Formula One car. I mean, you got to remember too, sure, yes, this is all new for Lance, but let's not take away what he's done in other formulas. He's the reigning European F3 champion. I mean, he's won every series he's raced in. So this kid is talented, but still making that step up to F1 in this new era of basically unknowns. I don't even think Lewis Hamilton himself knew what to exactly expect, how the car was going to behave for for like 100% what to expect at any rate until he actually got into the cockpit. So it's going to be a bit of a learning curve for Lance.
Still pretty good time when you consider all those difficulties he's been having over the last 2 days. Ninth overall in the fastest time in day Wednesday. Not bad. Just behind Lewis Hamilton, in front of Fernando Alonso, and McLaren really tough, by the way. They're having a tough time. But to finish on Lance Stroll, it is a lot. Yes, it's getting used to a new environment, literally. The step is not just on the track and on the car, but it's with the team surrounding you. The amount of people that you need to answer to, the amount of questions that you need to answer to, or the amount of movement that you need to plan. Everything is just planned. Like, people think, oh, running the track, taking the car. No, like every single steering movement they do during that 1 minute and 20 seconds is basically thought out, mapped out, planned. And you have to respect it. It's literally, you have to be able to take orders. And it's a lot of thing to ask to a young driver when he's just trying to remember the damn name of his engineer. It's almost that close. I'm exaggerating, but it's to illustrate the point that a kid wasn't the reserve driver of F1 of Williams last year. It is a big step for Lance. And yes, he's thrown into the deep end, but sometimes that's the best way to learn how to swim.
And that's true. And he's just not there because he's bringing a lot of sponsorship money, or they just think that he's a good guy and he deserves that seat for some reason. I mean, he's earned it. So he's just going to have to learn the hard way. But like you say, sometimes that's the best way to go. But just maybe a bit of a tangent here, what you were just talking about, how everything's basically mapped out for them. And they don't, well, I guess they always have to think, obviously. But it's interesting. And I've never really looked into it from a Formula One perspective. But I was watching a documentary not too long ago about the U.S. Navy Blue Angels. And what they do is the pilots will sit down in a room and actually sit and visualize every single movement and basically go through the entire routine that they're going to fly with all the different maneuvers and everything in their minds, and call out everything that they're going to say on the radio. So they've actually rehearsed this like constantly out of the cockpit. So I would imagine Formula One being Formula One, and how there's a plan for absolutely everything.
Especially for the qualifying process, Mark. In race, it's different because you have to react to the environment around you, meaning the other cars in the race situation. But in a testing situation, especially in a qualifying situation where you're trying to get marginal gain everywhere across the track, that at the end of the day, it gives you 1/10 of a second that gives you the pole. It's that small. It's those small margins. You get them by consciously, willingly, purposely doing small little details that have been planned out for your fast lap. So that's where we'll see where Lance Stroll is able to perform well or not. Yes, it's all good to be a fast driver during a race and save tires and do what Verstappen did. But for a young driver in a team that is mid-pack, if not going down to the bottom half of the pack as Williams, they need good qualifying result by him. So that's where, for me, we'll need to see the entire skill set of Lance Stroll is during the qualifying process, because that's where, in my opinion, the biggest step is, and is joining F1, is the whole process to get that car closest possible to the pole.
It's also very interesting. I bought a copy of Ross Brawn's book, Total Competition, that just came out, I think, just a month or so before Christmas. And it is fascinating to get a look inside the mind of probably one of the most brilliant minds that's ever been in Formula One. And the book is actually divided into two parts. The first part is about Ross and how he started in motor racing and how he worked his way up. And the second part of the book is more about the strategic part of Formula One, how you run a team and how you develop strategies on the track and during races and things like that. And it's really interesting to see some of the different thought processes that a guy like Ross has. And quite often, obviously, he talks about the years when he was with Ferrari, all those championships that they won with Schumacher and the Constructors' Championships. It was unprecedented. And it was interesting to see just like the different ways that they would do things. And And one of the interesting things I thought was how he was talking about the partnership that they had with Bridgestone, and how if you win, you all win together, and if you lose together, and how not to really call people out. And there was, what was it, 2005, 2006, thereabouts, when they changed the tire regulations. And that year, like basically the Bridgestone tires were developed for Ferrari, and they were optimized for Ferrari. And then when they changed it, then everybody else had an advantage. And it was interesting how they integrated the Bridgestone people into the factory at Maranello, and how they made them all feel like a team, and just the detail and the thought that he put into everything. It was a really fascinating thing it's just a fascinating book in general to read. So I would recommend to anybody to pick up that book, Total Competition by Ross Brawn.
Speaking of Ron, he's back in the circus this year.
Yes.
So see where his new role as director of where the future of F1. Basically, it's kind of hard to pinpoint what his day-to-day operation job will be, but he's glad he's back in the fold.
Well, absolutely. And a guy like Ross obviously has a lot to offer Formula One, because, I mean, he's seen it from so many different angles. But he was back in the news just a couple of days ago, and he says that he dreams of running one non-championship race every year to experiment with different race formats. And this isn't anything new, but since 1983, Formula One hasn't had a non-championship race. So basically, it's a Grand Prix, but there's no points. It doesn't count to anything. And the last time they did that was at Brands Hatch, and they called it the Race of Champions. But Ross's idea is to experiment with different things. Last year was that disastrous sort of knockout qualifying format that they had, where you just had like cars falling off, and then they had like 90 seconds or whatever it was. And it just didn't really work out, because then after about sort of partway through the qualifying sessions, you see the guys that obviously aren't going to make.
I think after the first one, like, yeah, we're going to go back to how it was.
Yeah, well, yeah, it went so quickly, and it was just a disaster, because, well, you had, say, Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg out on the track scrapping for pole. You had guys like Sebastian Vettel who knew that they weren't going to catch the Mercedes, so they thought, well, I've got a fairly good grid spot, so, well, like the last two Mercedes cars are out there, everybody else is walking around in their jeans with a baseball cap on, talking to reporters and things like that. So that was a bit interesting that Ross at least has that idea, and it's a smart idea, because you can come up with these ideas on paper or sitting around a table talking with other people and say, well, let's try this or let's try this. I mean, that qualifying thing that they tried in 2016 was a total disaster, but if they have something like a non-championship race, yeah, that'd be a great way to experiment with something. But when you have a calendar that runs from March to the end of November, which is going to be about 20-21 races. I mean, Ross was even saying about a month ago that he'd love to see a calendar of 25 races. So, I mean, if you look at that, I mean, that's basically 6 months. You could have a race every week, So, I mean,
when you have 25 races, Mark, almost still you have to do some double weekends where you have almost two races on the same weekend, like
exactly,
like Formula E or other leagues or circuits of autosport racing does.
Yeah, the point is, I like what he's saying with having a non-championship race. I just don't see how it's going to actually. I just don't see how it would actually fit into things right now. But
just the cost of it compared to what it's going to bring in, it's difficult nowadays, because it was maybe easier to do back then in Brands Hatch, especially 1983, when you're not talking about like the infrastructures and logistics needed now to organize a Grand Prix.
Yeah, I appreciate Ross's enthusiasm, but I think that might be a bit of a tough sell to the other people in the paddock. But now his colleague at Formula One, that's Sean Bratch, is the ex-chief over at ESPN, said now that the opportunity to promote and grow Formula One are, quote, simply huge. And he believes that digital products are going to be the most important part to more fan engagement through the years. And he made a good point. He believes that Formula One has been left behind in the digital revolution that's really taken hold, say, in the last 10 years or so. And that of course, has a lot to do with the Bernie Ecclestone era of Formula One and how they wanted to market themselves and how they wanted to do things. And so that obviously has left them lagging in certain areas, but it now presents them with a unique opportunity. Liberty, being the people that they are, have the know-how and the expertise to do it. So it's going to be fascinating to see what they do, right? Yeah, that's what they do, right?
That's exactly what Liberty Media is as an entity. That's why it was surprising that it's them that got it, because they got it for not many reasons, but getting F1 is an end to a mean. It means to end. Sorry, I keep twisting my my phrases, but yeah. But Liberty Media bought F1 to grow their portfolio. Yes, maybe make money down the road. Yes, because still have to pay that mortgage that they took to buy F1. But it's to raise the profile of Liberty Media, to be able to sell more advertisement in the future, to be able to sell more of that. And to do this, you need to gather the audience. And how do you gather audience nowadays? It's not just in front of the TV, but it's in front of your phone, in front of your tablets, in front of your watch, your fridge, your mirror in your bathroom. Like, there's a lot of connected things now, different platforms where you can watch sports live. And this is why it's important now, because sports is one of the only TV properties that is almost not watchable on DVR. You're going to get spoiled. It's not going to be easy. So the advertisers know that you're going to watch a sporting event live. Doesn't matter if it's 7 a.m. in the morning or 2 a.m. at night. You will watch it if you are a hardcore fan. And it is easier to market certain products to a hardcore fan, and they could generate more advertising revenue. So that's the big end goal with Liberty Media, getting F1. It's all out of the open. It's going to help F1. We're happy about it. But that's why. So they're going to push hard to get more people invested, get more people interested and entertained by Formula One through all different platforms. I wouldn't be surprised if this year there's new things, or if a year or two, the time they need to take around and change direction as a company and see where they can bring out the quote unquote new media, but it's not even new media anymore. It's life.
It's just media now.
It's not news. Exactly. It's media. So it'll be interesting to see how they incorporate those. Just to finish, Mark, I was going to say, I can't wait for the F1 rights to be up for renewal, to see what kind of package now F1 would be willing to go to, which they weren't in the time of Bernie, because Bernie was very conservative in his view, and especially of how he controls. And now in 2017 and going in the future, you don't control your product all the time. You have to give a lot of leeway to the production companies, to the TV channels, or whoever represents and shows and broadcasts your product. You have to trust them with that package, and they're going to hype it the most for their viewers, because that's what's important. So, example, Sky has a lot of leeway. The way they present F1 and the way we have experienced it last year revolutionized the way we watch F1. Do that globally, different scale to everybody in their own market. You're talking about a big amount of new eyes watching the product.
Definitely. And of course, like last year, especially in Canada, was unprecedented, the amount of coverage that we got, because in previous years, you would get qualifying, you would get the race, and that was it. But we got the complete Sky package from start to finish, the pre-race, the post-race, the driver's parade, everything that they put out. And it made it, for me, who, like, I'm a hardcore Formula One guy, it made it much more enjoyable to be able to see all this extra content, to be able to see Simon Lazenby and Damon Hill, Johnny Herbert, all these different guys, and get Crofty in there, get all the different experience, the point of views, the analysis, all these different things, which was just made it much more complete in my point of view, rather than just watching the action on the track, which is obviously the main thing that you're watching about. But if you're a hardcore fan, you want to consume as much as you can get. And it's interesting how that things are already starting to change under the new ownership. They've actually got a new marketing and communication departments at Formula One, which probably means they're brand new, because especially I don't think they only had like one guy doing marketing before.
Exactly. I was going to mention, can you believe, Mark, that for the entire Formula One, there was one person working that job? This is mind-boggling. You can have a team of 30, a team of 100, and would still not be enough because of the global skill of that sport.
Yep.
And like one person just from Montreal, that's what should it be. But Bernie was so relying on promoters locally that he didn't believe on maybe growing sometimes the brand as a whole before that. Then branding his production. It's important to brand the entire umbrella and not just leave the promoter to take care of his own one.
Yeah. And it's also fascinating this week that they actually allowed the teams and drivers to post short video clips of the testing sessions to their social media channels. And in the past, the way that the Formula One broadcast rules were set up was only the commercial rights holders or the official broadcasters could broadcast moving images. So you couldn't do like a Facebook Live thing if you're Mercedes, or you couldn't post a short video clip to your Instagram, or you couldn't Periscope, or whatever the case may be. And so that's really cool that they're doing that. And then you had Lewis last year in Japan. Obviously, I think maybe it was a little bit of stress too when in that. Well, I mean, he was having some bad luck. He was in the battle with Nico there, and so he gets on to Snapchat or whatever it was in the press conference, which drew some criticism. But I think that's going to be more important going forward. Is that people want to be able to interact with their favorite drivers, and social media is the best way to do it. So that was an interesting thing to see that they've. Well, I mean, if you're going to let people do it, obviously they're going to take advantage of it. So that's a great step. But also some other interesting news for Formula One this week. And I don't know if you want to call this the Liberty Media effect, or if this was something that was already in the works, but the Russian Grand Prix has been extended until 2025, and our home Grand Prix at Ile Notre Dame in Montreal has been extended to 2029. And the good news for Montreal is that for 2019, the city is actually going to build, well, the city owns the circuit, but the city of Montreal is going to build a brand new garage facility to replace the one that's there. I mean, it's going to be a completely new building. They're going to destroy and tear down the old one and build a new state-of-the-art facility. So that's really good news. So I'm just kind of wondering now, like there was some discussions also that what with the departure of Bernie and Liberty coming in, that there are now different ways for Silverstone to monetize and sell naming rights and things like that, things that were banned previously under old agreements. So, and it was only like 2 months ago that they were saying that because I think they've got the contract to 2025 or something, but they have an out after 2019, and they're saying, well, we don't know if we're interested, or if we can. A few
months ago, we didn't know if we're going to have a Grand Prix this year, just because of Bernie Ecclestone's way of making threats and be like, if you don't give me this, I'm going to find a way to pull out, and me gangster style almost. And now things are going to be changed. It's transparency. It's 2017. It's the way business is done in today's quote unquote post-corruption world. You can feel the hesitation in my voice. That's because I cover FIFA. But in a let's just say post-privacy world, let's put it this way, because on this world, almost everything can be found out because paper trails and everything is interconnected, and well, everybody's got a phone and a camera and a microphone, so almost no conversation is private in today's world. So in the post-privacy world, where things are done in the open, we hope that this new parent company treats the way to do stuff the way it's supposed to be done for the fans, for the F1 as a whole. And F1 as a whole always loved going to Montreal. It's a different feel. It's a different type of circuit. It's a different type of challenge for the cars themselves. And that's what it's all about. And the fact that now we're going to have it probably, maybe almost for sure, until 2029, that's a lot to do with the fact that Bernie is not there anymore, because he was always trying to find a way to give it to Montreal.
Well, it's great news because I think the first Grand Prix in Montreal, if I'm not mistaken, was 1978, 77, somewhere thereabouts. I think they've only missed a couple of years in almost 40. So it's great to know that it's going to be around for another dozen years at least, because, and I mean, obviously we're a little bit biased. You may be a little bit more because you live in Montreal, but it is, to me, it's part of the calendar. It's just one of those tracks that's belongs in Formula One. Maybe it doesn't have maybe the same prestige as a Monza or some of those classic tracks, but it's a great track in its own right, and I'm happy to see it stay for another 10 or 12 years. But let's just
look at the track left, Mark. Not a lot of them you can say you had a race there in 1979.
That's true. I mean, some of these new tracks come in and out, and they're gone in a couple of years.
Outside of Monza, is there anyone left? Yeah, they left. Yeah, they don't really use Hockenheim, do they? So yeah, a lot of the Interlagos, yeah, Brazil, it's other legendary track, but Circuit Villeneuve is one of those.
Yeah, well, the thing is with the Nürburgring is not the old classic and obviously extremely dangerous Nürburgring. And
29 kilometers.
Yeah, God, it was taking like 15 minutes to do a lap. And Hockenheim really isn't Hockenheim. I mean, they completely redesigned the track. I went there to a DTM race when I was living in Europe, and this is going back probably 10 or 15 years now, but prior to the redesign of the track. And you get the cars that would come into the stadium section, and they would come past the start-finish straight, past the pits there, and they go around the corner and disappear into the woods, and you wouldn't see them for a couple of minutes until they came way back around the back straight, and then into the corner, and then through that sort of series of tight corners before you come back out on the straight. And as much as I like the old track to watch on TV, from a spectator's point of view, it was kind of weird. You know, you would only just see the cars for maybe 30 seconds or so, and then they disappear, and then they come back later. But why don't we just wrap up the show now with a couple of more car-related things? There was a warning that was put out by the FIA that some of the Formula One teams could be forced to remove suspension systems or redesign them if they cannot prove that aerodynamic performance is not the design's primary purpose. Now, this came down after Ferrari initially sought clarification on these suspension systems about 2 months ago. It was at the end of last year. Ferrari is thought to have wanted this clarification because they thought that the systems that were previously legally being used by Red Bull and Mercedes were being further developed, and they thought maybe, or at least the speculation is that it was getting into too much of a gray area, that there was maybe some unfair advantage. But it's interesting, as of Wednesday, so March 1st, at least one unnamed Formula One team has been asked by the FIA to make changes to their suspension. So that is interesting. And then Renault has been advised by the FIA to change their rear wing design, and that's specifically around the support pillar, which joins the wing directly at the DRS actuator pod rather than at the main plane. So the potential...
Of course. Yeah, of course. I know exactly what that is.
Well, the thing is, you without getting too technical in it, the potential advantage of the way that Renault has designed it is that it could actually enhance the DRS advantage. So when you get the rear wing opening and you get that reduction in downforce and you get that extra speed, it's just the way that they designed it, that pillar joining at the DRS pod would actually amplify that effect and maybe make it a little bit of an unfair advantage. So as soon as the Renault released their car last week, apparently there were a number of rival F1 teams that picked up on that right away and made some sort of comments to the FIA, and subsequently they said, yeah, guys, you're going to have to do something about that. That is against the spirit of the rules. But also another thing talking about the rules that I thought that is interesting with the new cars is the so-called shark fin, which I thought was banned several years ago. What was it, 2010, 2011? But there is
even before that, there was some in like mid 2000 too, where like Jordan came out of nowhere and had like two fins coming out of the side of the car or something.
Yeah, well, there is apparently a loophole in the new regulations that allows for them. And Christian Horner, the Red Bull boss, had actually wanted to get them banned, basically more on aesthetic grounds more than anything else, because basically what these shark fins do is help clean up the air as it goes over the rear wing and helps the cornering effect. But I guess Christian was in the minority, and I guess the shark fins are here to stay at least for 2017. So we'll see what happens.
At least up until maybe March 26. A lot of things change very quickly, and sometimes between practice number 1 and practice number 2, one rule will have changed and there won't be any more shark fins. That's something that's always in the realm of possibility.
Yeah, things can happen quickly in Formula One. And then finally, McLaren's had a pretty tough time at testing this week. They haven't really seen too much of the track. They had a problem on the first day with an oil tank. And then they had a full engine failure on Tuesday, which prompted Honda's F1 engine chief, Yusuke Hasegawa, to say that they are feeling sorry, and I say that in air quotes, for McLaren drivers Fernando Alonso and Stoffel van Dorn. So not a great start to 2017 for the black and orange McLaren, which still seems like well, I know the orange is more a traditional McLaren color, but if you kind of go back and look at last year, the all-black Mercedes, or not the all-black Mercedes, but the all-black McLaren was quite a difference from the silver arrows of the Mercedes-powered years. But the black and orange, even though it's going back more to that traditional look for them, just that inclusion of the black still kind of makes me think it still doesn't look like a McLaren 100%. But
nope.
I guess
I miss McLaren when it was either white and red, like in
the Marlboro colors.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Or in the West colors of gray and black. That's what McLaren in my time of following one was at their heyday.
Yeah, me too.
I remember like a race from like 1996 Suzuka that I had taped that I watched maybe 5-6 times. Oh God, I love the McLaren cars in that race.
Oh yeah, absolutely beautiful. So, well, probably the black and orange paint scheme is probably the one thing that is furthest from their mind at the moment, if they can't even get to the track. But Eric Boulier, the McLaren boss, said that there is no problem or no troubles in what he called the marriage between Honda and McLaren. So we'll see if they can get the cars out in the track and they can get some reliability and power out of the Honda engine, because Honda said that they were pushing the envelope this year and taking lots of risks in what they were trying to do. And well, at least right now, maybe it's looking a little bit like they've pushed a little bit too hard, but they do have the benefit of 3 weeks before Melbourne. But whatever they're going to do, they got to get it sorted out pretty quickly.
Yeah. And not just that, there's been a lot of problems. They say they're all fixables. Well, that's the difference, though. If you have a lot of problem with your car, every time you're trying to fix one, it affects all the other ones too. It becomes very complicated. And yeah, you might say that it's fixables. We all know we pinpointed all the problems. Still 3 weeks away, 3.5 weeks away. Comes pretty quickly. And 1, 2, 3 bad races, you're talking about it's going to be a very difficult situation to get yourself in the top 10 of the drivers or top 5 or 6 of constructors. So McLaren really is on the clock right now.
Oh yeah, 3 weeks between now and the first Grand Prix of the year is going to go by in a blink. So they are definitely under pressure at Honda to deliver and get some, well, I'd say get a reliable engine to them, but to just try and sort out the problems and get it done. But it's been obviously a difficult couple of years for McLaren and Honda. That's they were obviously behind on engine development with these new hybrid engines that came out in 2013. Was it 2013, 2014? I've forgotten now. Anyways,
2013, I think.
Yeah, so they've obviously were behind because Mercedes had been developing the hybrid engine technology for 4 or 5 years before it was actually introduced and actually going on the track in an actual Formula One in 2014. And so Honda, they had to sort of learn on the fly, but there was a lot of hope that this year that things would be getting better for them. So we'll wait and see. But like I say, they don't have a lot of time to get it done. But speaking of time, I think we're pretty much have wrapped things up and we're where we want to leave it for this week. Kevin, before we go tonight, what's going on the network this week?
Well, it's the lead up to the MLS season that's going to start on Friday night. You can listen to Soccer Today all week. We had great guests, Paul Tenario of 442 USA. We had Rudy Schuler of the Sporting News this morning. A lot of great guests to preview the upcoming season. And Monday, we had Jeff Router of 55-1 talk about Minnesota United. Upcoming guests as well, Charles Boehm, Jonathan Tannenwald, all your favorite Major League Soccer correspondents are on the show this week to talk about the big weekend that starts Friday night.
Cool. And where can everybody find that online?
Sportspodcastingnetwork.com, and you can find SPN on every podcast directory out there. Look for sportspodcastingnetwork.com or Soccer Today. And my Twitter feed at Kev Laramée, of course.
Excellent. Of course, you can follow this show and get all the latest show news on Twitter at Scuderia F1. Of course, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, iHeartRadio, all those good places. Wherever you subscribe to your favorite podcasts, we're there too. And of course, also on the Sports Podcasting Network, we're everywhere. We're difficult not to find. Or I guess we're easy to find. I'm not sure. Anyways.
Well, that's what they say. Two negative makes a positive. So we're difficult not to find.
Well, we'll work out all these preseason winter testing bugs by the time the Formula One circus gets to Melbourne in a couple of weeks. So by the time they're ready, we'll be ready. And it's going to be a great year for Formula One. It's going to be a great year for us as well. So that's a wrap for myself and for Kevin. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Scuderia F1 podcast. If you want to get the show notes for this episode, then head over to ScuderiaF1pod.com. Want to get in touch with us? Then email us at ScuderiaF1pod@gmail.com.
You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.